I'm gonna try to make this one quick and get it loaded up tonight. Let's talk for a quick second about scraping. Um, I'm not scraping as good as I probably could. It's a very time-consuming and tedious task. But as you can see, I've actually already scraped that once, and I got 60 different lights on. Sorry about this, guys. But yeah, I mean, that's after one scrape. It was a lot worse than that when I started. I'm not scraping, like I said, to my fullest potential. I'm probably getting about 50-60% touching, which is a lot better than what I had. I mean, I'm talking every one of my waves, and I haven't even touched inside my gibs yet. Every one of my waves, the flats, were, I was lucky if they were 20%. I think this one was probably the best, and I had a little bit touching through the center here, and just a thin line all the way across underneath on that side. So pretty much my gibs were holding everything tight. And if you have a small lathe or mill and there's no happy mediums to your gibs, it's either tight as shit or loose as shit. Loose as your ex-girlfriend, I guess you could say. It's probably your ways. I did another video where I could fit a 4/1000 of an inch feeler gauge almost all the way under, all the way across there. So that's not even touching. I suppose that's why this lathe's name is Shaky Sue Chatterbox. Let's go over some essentials you'll need. You'll need a roller. This one I made out of a couple of angle brackets. Just drilled some holes in there and stuck some small, I don't know what you'd call it, I guess wire for the most part in there. Some heavy duty wire just to keep it from rotating. And that's actually the first piece I ever turned on a different lathe. It's not the best, it works. It actually works pretty good, but I don't need a real big one. You'll need a surface plate. If you can get a 9x12, and I suppose it might be adequate if you got a 7x14 lathe or something. But if you have anything, they say your surface plate needs to hold the biggest part you plan on machining. So, like this table, for instance, if I was decided to do the table side of it, I might be able to do it on there, at an angle or something. It would definitely be difficult. It would be hard to get a good consistent marking on it, so I'd have to take it slow and do some extreme caution of what I was doing. So let's go over what you're going to need. You need a paintbrush or tip brush. You can use paper towels. You can use recyclable or washable rags. I'm just using a combination of paper towel and shop towel, so that way after I scrape I can brush it off, slather on you're going to need some mineral spirits. You all know what that is. Some kind of cup, some kind of brush for putting that on, or rag. So after you scrape it the first time, you smear some mineral spirits on there. You're going to need some stones. This is silicone carbide. I've been using this one just because I can get underneath the ways with it. It's not very easy either. I actually just dropped it a minute ago and broke it. I knew it was going to happen sooner or later, but I can put it there and I can kind of get down there and hold that down, and like again, doing this with one hand, kind of hold the end down so I can get a good solid scrape, so so my fingers on the back aren't causing it to tilt up, just like so. For some of the smaller surfaces, this is a little Arkansas stone. You kind of can't tell because it's dyed blue, but for like these surfaces, it's actually kind of nice because I can just run it over 5 or 6 times during finishing, and it'll actually like burnish. I think that's the right word. But yeah, it'll pretty much make the high spots show up without even putting high spot remover on them. It'll make them all shiny. You're going to need, depending on whether you're using steel or carbide, the bare minimum, you'll need a silicone carbide wheel, or I suppose you could do it with a Dremel if you really had to, and then a standard grinding wheel if you're using steel. Steel's great for roughing. I find carbide's good for finishing. Gonna need either some kind of stone, or I've been using this is actually a wore out medium grit. It's actually quite smooth. I've been using this just to hone my tools afterwards. You can use whatever you use for lubrication on that. This is a little bit of Harvey's cutting fluid. Works just fine. It's nice and thick. It's not like honing oil where you get 6 scrapes and your oil's gone. Okay, now with tooling, I don't have any good store-bought tooling. I'm gonna have to figure out what I'm gonna do for flaking it. I might use that. This has worked just for a little bit of getting up underneath, because when you're cutting, you want to come in, you want to do your cross slides, and you don't have to do a cross slide every time. You can do it all this way once, clean it, and then your next pass come back across and do it this way. You can do just a little section like this, and that's actually, when you're doing a big surface like this, I'd actually recommend that you do a little bit, cross it, move on to your next section, do a little bit, cross it. So that way, because once you do the whole thing, especially if you have like the whole thing to scrape, then your first pass you scrape off all your bluing. And if you're not scraping the entire thing, though, you can still see your scrapes from before, so it makes it really difficult to see where exactly you just scraped. So you're actually you end up scraping over low spots, which makes them even lower, and it just takes twice as long. So I just got my little homemade file tool. I made this one. This is a old Bridgeport screwdriver I got at the pawn shop for $1. The tips were busted on it, but the shaft's really good steel. This one actually is really comfortable to hold. For these smaller projects, I mean, you can buy a big scraper, excuse me, and it'd probably work just fine, but you really need a tool that fits the object you're doing. So unless you're doing a great big lathe or Bridgeport ways or something like that, something like this, I'd suggest just making your own. This is actually, this is a little tungsten carbide tip, and it's actually for a replacement tip for those little knife sharpeners. I got 2 of these at the hardware store for $7 or something. So that works. That actually works really well. It was actually, it's meant for this part to go into the knife sharpener and the knife to run down the side here. And I just had to round off the end a little bit. I don't know if you guys can see the roundness on it, but it's, it's not flat. I do have a selection of flat tools. This one I made, I just, got a set screw there. I got another one there so I can create a tension on my little T nut that I slotted in there. I don't know if you'd call that a T nut, but yeah, you guys see what it is. And then the blade's actually a piece of old file, and this one works pretty good for roughing. Steel, you're gonna have to sharpen quite a bit. This is another homemade one. I don't know, I'm showing you the rod. Everybody's seen a piece of rod before. This isn't anything kind of fancy rod, just a piece of scrap I had. That was actually a sorry guys, lathe bit. You can see where it's cut in there. And it was just a piece of carbide that I got it in an auction lot, and somebody had taken it off a lathe bit, or it never went on one. And I just took my grinder and cut a slot in there, and then filed it out to fit, and then soldered it in there. I'm not doing any brazing. I don't have I probably could make the heat for it right now, but with my 2 torch setups, they're just propane and propane oxygen, so they're just kind of a pain in the butt to do an actual heat for brazing. This is not the highest grade. It's a silver bearing solder. No, actually I lie. It's a 98% tin, 2% alimony solder, I believe. But I got that down at Ace Hardware. It was $10 or something for just a little tube with some flux. It's kind of a pain in the ass to use, but it's got a melting point of 450, and it's got a 8,000 psi tensile strength. So it's held those bits on just fine. I put some pretty good pressure behind them. This is just another little scraper set. I got an X marked on there because both of these sides cut just a little bit differently, even though it's, you know, it's finished for cutting on both sides, but one cuts a little better than the other, so I got the X marked on there just so I know which side I'm using without having to experiment. This little thing works good for stabbing people in prison. Just joking. This actually works good too for getting up underneath my ways and just scraping that little last edge off. I don't care if I have a little bit of a downward tilt back there, as long as I can get the majority of this to be flat. And then this little duckbill thing here is a pain in the ass to sharpen, but it also works, you know, relatively decent for getting down in there and you know, getting on the edges. And then last but not least, this is just a piece of it's called die steel. It's a planer blade, and this is actually a yard sale find or garage sale find or something, and I didn't pay anything for this. Actually, the people said, hey, I was buying a bunch of other stuff, you know, old metal stock railroad spikes and stuff, and they're like, hey, just take this planer blade with you. We don't really want anybody to get cut on it. But this is actually a good steel. This isn't just a high speed steel. This is D2. And I don't really do any scraping with this. I imagine you could do some scraping with it, but this steel is so hard that, you know, it's hard to get an edge that'll actually take into the it'll cut on this, because this is all whatever they cut this with. I swear to God they cut these with a fly cutter. But what I've been doing with this is I just got my edge brought down, and I've been using it, you know, right towards the end when I got a pretty good scattering of dots all the way across. I just take this and I put it at a real high tilt, and I push down real hard, and I just go all the way across one way, you know, back across the other way, and I pretty much just burnish with this. So once I have, you know, I'm saying, okay, I'm satisfied with what's here. It's going to have, you know, I'm only getting about a 50-60% contact on all the parts I've scraped, which is better than a 10 or 20, but it's an even contact across. So even if it does wear a little bit, at least it'll be wearing evenly. And then this, I just, you know, when I'm ready to quit, I just burnish it pretty much and make it all shiny and flat, and then I throw it back on the stone, and you know, it probably brings me another 10% just for burnishing it. It doesn't really take the stock off. I mean, I'm pretty much just scraping the bluing off with it, and I can rub my finger across it when I'm done. You can't feel any grit or anything, and so that's what I've been using that for. So that's pretty much what I have for tooling. It's, you know, you're just going to have to experiment. Don't be afraid to screw it up. I mean, just pay attention to what you're doing and do it evenly, or at least evenly on the spots that need to be scraped. It's tedious, but in the end, it's going to reward you. So the rewards really do outweigh the pain in the ass. It's kind of funny because if you look at this surface, I don't know if you guys can see that, but it actually looks like that surface has been hand scraped, which is, frankly, I'm fucking dumbfounded, because that surface doesn't even matter. They could have left that surface unfinished because it touches absolutely nothing, but yet it looks like it was hand scraped. So so that's what you need. The process: scrape, brush clean, mineral spirits. I do one paper towel just to get that crap off, and I do another one just to, you know, these ones kind of pick up just a little bit more than those, so I just do that one again. And then before I put more bluing on it, I rub my hands over it real good and get all the little bits of dust off I can with my hands. And then, well, you'll be blue when you're doing this job, unless you wear gloves like a sissy. Oh, it must be on it. It's like 2 in the morning or some shit here, so, and it's probably 95 degrees in this damn garage. When you're putting your bluing on, as you can see, I got kind of a spot right there. Now that's for rubbing. That's when you're doing fine stuff, and you really want this like super thin. Or if you're doing, if you're doing these like these two surfaces where you can get them on at the same time, then you can go a little bit thicker. But this stuff is like, okay, stay away from Prussian blue. It's you could probably use this. I think it would work better for mashing gears. It's really too thick for doing any scraping. I spent 2 days thinking I was getting somewhere until I got my Daikin in the mail. Daikin. And then I got the Daikin and I realized that I pretty much had to start all over. So anyway, you got your stone, clean it off real good, dust it off, take your hand, make sure there's no dust on it. Take a little bit of spray oil. What I use is, I wouldn't use WD-40. I just have some of this, it's the Ace brand E-Lube. It's pretty much like WD-40, but it's not the exact same ingredients. Don't go real heavy on it. I usually just, I hold it back here, just one little squirt to get a spot about that big right in the middle. Get yourself a paper towel, rub that oil around real good, flip the paper towel off, rub as much of the oil off as you can. I mean, you're not going to get all of it, but you want it to where it doesn't feel oily when you touch it. And then once you have that, just take your Daikin and put, it doesn't take much. This is, less than what a Hershey's, a little, baking Hershey's semi-sweet chocolate chip is amount. It's like, it's less than the part that sticks out of an eraser is on this right here, and that's more to last me 4 or 5 hours worth of scraping. So, don't put a lot on there because you're just going to waste it. I mean, that tube should last you 6 months if you scrape nearly every day. So once you got your oil down, put your little spot on there. Take your roller. You can make little fabric rags too. They're a little bit cleaner than rollers. It just depends on, it depends on the person. Maybe down the road I'll make myself a little fabric rag just to try it out, or maybe something out of a little leather pouch or something. But I had the parts for the roller. This is, the angle bracket is just aluminum angle. You can get it pretty much anywhere, Ace Hardware, whatever. If you have a machine shop, I'm willing to bet you got some stacked somewhere. The little roller on it came out of an old copying machine. I love old copying machine parts. I got a whole assortment of small stock. I actually just got we'll go over here in the dark. This is some of the stuff I just pulled out of an old one today. I got a nice little transformer. Got a nice little stepper motor. And then I got 2 other little stepper motors. These are a little bit different kind, but they're still little stepper motors. So, why did I bring that out here? Now it's all dusty. Try to keep this clean. I'm actually need to soak it in some mineral spirits or something because it's getting kind of gummed up to where it won't rotate. But after I'm done, I clean it off and I toss it up there with all my lathe tools so it's up out of the way and not getting too dirty. So you put your little spot on there. Take your roller, smear it out, get your roller rolling because it's just going to want to push it around while it's still straight out of the tube. So you got to get it to where it's rolling, and then just take it and put a small amount over here. And I'm talking a small amount. It shouldn't, you shouldn't be able to barely get your fingerprint on it. If you're doing fine stuff, if you're doing other stuff, you might want to put it on a little thicker. If you slap your part down and it's all blue, then you got too much. The easiest way to rectify that, wipe your part off and just roll this stuff out into a bigger area. So once you have that on there, you'll take your part, you'll set it down, make sure this was actually made for this part. And you guys can see, I mean, I'm using this for my for rubbing on my waves right now, but I got a pretty good coverage. I mean, this stuff's on there thin, and it's a hell of a lot better than it was. At least it's touching most of the way across. So make sure you don't move this outside your coverage area. If you rub it onto the dry stone, you're going to get it's going to scrape the Daikin off some part of it, so you'll have it thicker on another. And then when you go to to check it, you're going to have a false rub and you're going to be scraping the wrong part. So you keep it in the little area, and then just best thing to do is just use gravity, you know, kind of hold it from the side if you have to, move it around a little bit, pick it up, you know. And this is, like I said, it's on there really thin right now, but so yeah, that's where my really high spots are. And that stuff's, like, as you can tell, there's barely any color on there, so that's super thin. So if I get a little color on there, it actually lightens up quite a bit. You're going to want it quite a bit thicker than that for even your high detail work. This has been sitting here for a while, and I'm not using it currently. I still got to clean it off. So that's the basics to get you started. When you're done, I just use a little bit of Windex, squirt it down, use my roller, and it actually, like, rolls it right back off the stone for the most part, and then wipe it off, and then spray it down, wipe it off, spray it down, wipe it off, and then put my stone up, and then same thing the next day. One more thing I'm going to tell you, especially with these Chinese ones, there will be times, or at least with most of you, there'll be times where you get, you know, like with, I can't say if it was this side or the other side, I think it was this side, but you know, like all this was, there was no blue, and then there was like a big almost U shape of blue right here. And it took me a little while to figure out exactly what was going on. I kept scraping it and kept scraping it. And then I realized the outside edges on these, when they do the surface grinding on them, they don't go all the way off the edge with the surface grinding, so it leaves a little, like, I don't know what you'd call it, man, a little like ski jump on the edges, where the edges are higher. And then when you rub it on your surface plate, it highlights all this, but those parts that are actually touching, it rubs all the blue off, so you can't see that those are actually high spots. You just think that they're low spots. So the best way to deal with that is, oh yeah, like I was saying, I got different profiles of these. This one's pretty much flat across it. You know, I know that one's flat across the edge. This one's got a little bit of a curve. This one's got a little bit of a curve. But if you take any of these, and I like the flat ones to check it, and you know, when you're scraping these and you have to deal with these edges, your best bet's to scrape into the edge as opposed to trying to catch the edge over here. But when you scrape into these, if you come and you feel it hit like a curb, then you have a lip right there that you have to take off. And so I would, you know, I'll work at the lip this way and work at it, you know, this way, and I'll even take it and just real lightly, you know, work it down this way, and you'll see it cutting just that lip if you're holding if you're holding a flat blade nice and straight. So you know, it's different strokes for different folks, really. I'm experimenting here, so I got a plethora of blades, and it's actually kind of nice because it gives me a lot of options on how to get at this thing. Another thing I was reading, there's a lot of good text on the internet about scraping. You might have to look at several different terms, scraping, flaking, spotting, frosting, to find the text. Slideways, as opposed to just ways, seems to turn up quite a few good hits. So there's a lot of good text out there, but there's only a few decent videos that give you a rough idea. Another thing is when you're doing your rough scraping, I've just been using, you know, I use this on here. I usually have it a little bit closer and just pin it down nice and tight, and this doesn't move when I'm rough scraping it. When you're doing rough scraping, they say to hold your part nice and rigid. When you're doing light scraping, kind of leave it so this thing ain't moving anyway, but kind of leave it so your part can slide around a little bit, so that way you're not taking too big of a cut. It's kind of allowing it to play. Another thing I'm doing, I got this little setup here, and just so I can get at, you know, like that saddle, I'd take this and I'd actually use that big C-clamp and just clamp it right to the bottom of the table, and then I'd clamp my saddle right out here with one C-clamp, so I could, you know, move all the way around my saddle and get at it from different angles, and it just makes everything a hell of a lot easier. The other thing is, when I'm scraping single direction, like I said, you know, sometimes I'd go this way, and this is especially when I'm just trying to rough it into shape, and then I'd re-blue it, and then I'd go this way. As you see, I got a F right there, so that's for the front. So when I have that board sticking out here and I got my piece clamped on out here, I have that sitting right there. And then after I get done with the scrape, I'll flip it over and I'll go get my blue, and that'll, it'll remind me which way it's supposed to be facing, because it's a lot easier when I have that mounted here to be standing right here and scraping this way, and it's a lot easier to rotate the part than it is to come over here on this side of my table and get at it. So that's just something you guys might want to think about. Other than that, lots of hydration. If you got an air conditioner, freaking use it. Yeah, like I said, the flat blades work good for some things. If you're just doing some real severe roughing, a curved blade, they say on like a 1-inch blade, like the radius of a 20-inch circle on the curve, and then on like a 1/2-inch blade, you want like a 10-inch circle. So I'll give you a rough idea, but it's really preference. I mean, the rounder the blade you get, the thinner the cut you're going to get. So if you want to get, if you're down to your finishing cups, you're going to want at least a relatively flat edge on it, so you're not getting just a little tiny pencil mark across it every time, which you can do it with that, but it's going to take you one hell of a long time. So the turtle wins the race in this one. Get them ways scraped in. I guarantee you a lot of your headaches with your gibs and just overall performance of your mill will go away, or your lathe. So as far as alignment goes, the mill is kind of forgiving, especially the mini mill with the solid column, because you can shim your column, or you can even scrape your column to tram your table. So I could scrape my saddle, let's say, and have it tilted a little bit forward on the front, and have it tilted a little bit this way. I'm going to try not to, have it tilted this way and this way, and I can still turn around and I can tram my column to match my table, even though I don't want to do that. But you guys get the idea. It's a lot more forgiving. So if you have both a little mill and a little lathe, I say get some practice on your mill. The lathe, y'all know how picky this bitch is. You gotta have your spindle center line aligned with your tailstock, aligned with your slideways. And then if you think about it, your carriage or saddle or whatever has to be, when it's put on, it has to be parallel to your ways. I mean, it has to sit on there flat, so your cross slide faces flat, so you're not, you can't set a center when you're cutting down at an angle or cutting up at an angle. I suppose you could, but you'd be better off cutting it up at an angle to the center than you would be cutting down to one. So you've got to have, your saddle flat, so your cross slide will be flat, and then, obviously you want your compound flat. So you want all these flat, and I can't really help you with alignment. The best thing I could say is figure out a way to do a 3-point stand off of your ways on your saddle, so that way you can put it on your surface stone, and you can use a micrometer to measure across across whatever part you can find that's flat. Obviously your saddle being flat is going to impart to your cross slide being flat, so you'd go off of your cross slide ways to ensure that your saddle's flat, and you'd have to get some kind of a 3-point, 3 machinist jacks or something, and then use your micrometer running on the surface plate. And then when you're down to this, you can just scrape this and set this directly on your surface plate and run your micrometer on it and see if you have any high edges, and the same with your cross slide. But you also have to check your, both your top and your bottoms. So, I imagine the same with the tailstock. I have to do all of these. The tailstock, I don't know if it has any play, but I know I need to scrape it because I actually filed it into alignment, thanks to Grizzly, giving me a tailstock that's pointing to fucking space. So, yeah, that's all the more help I can get you with alignment. I've been trying to actually find some more information on it. I sent a message to Ox Tools to